Yes, about a decade ago, I wrote a book called 50 Good Men and True, regarding the famous 50 soldiers that came from Colville and District. Indeed, one of those soldiers was my grandfather, Charles Hatter, a very fine man who suffered terribly in the war, but he would not talk about it until about 1964, when there was a series of on BBC television called The Great War. I then realised that what he'd gone through in that war, and spoke to him and said, please inform me whatever you can, because I want to record all this information so that the famous 50 are never forgotten. The 1st 5th Battalion, they were 50 men short, you see, and so we decided to come to Colville, because Colville, they had coal miners, engineers, etc., men who who were tough enough, they had a difficult life, and they were ideal to be in the forces. I find it very emotional, obviously standing here next to a cardboard cutout of my grandfather. I'm also stunned by the efforts of Dina Wildgoose for all, and the people, the volunteers who have helped her. I can't thank them enough, because it means now that I wrote the book so it wouldn't be forgotten. We're now in a situation that all of this, they will never be forgotten, and they don't deserve to be forgotten, because they led the way for the 5.5 to 6 million soldiers that followed them in the First World War.
Well, this soldier is one of my relatives. It's George William Underwood. George went to war in 1914, and he fought for 4 years until he was tragically killed in 1980. As a family member, it's a privilege really to remember George, and we were at the War Memorial this morning at 11 o'clock for the 2-minute silence and the service to celebrate the fallen, and it was particularly special to be here in Colville where George left to set off to war.
During the heavy bombardment of the Germans, his job was to repair the lines, which in those days were non lines. And under the heavy bombardment, he was there for 2 hours doing this, and this is why he won his regiment.
Well, it makes us extremely proud, and because of this exhibition, because I was contacted, we found out even more about his experiences in the war, and we just think it's amazing.
My name's Susan McClavey, and this is my granddad, James Emerson, and his brother William behind. We've come down to look at the exhibition today because we feel so proud that he was one of the first 50 to go.
Yeah, one of the roles that he did in the First World War was tunnelling, because he was a miner, tunnelling under the trenches and laying explosives under the German lines. And he kept a diary, and we've actually got a diary in the family. And it's on the day he set the explosive off. It was a Sunday, and he was a big Christian, and he was praying for the German soldiers in this diary.
I feel quite humbled to stand here today, because this is the end of a story that has been part of our family now for the last 80, 90 years, and it's only really through the efforts of Michael bringing all this to our attention that has given us this interest to research and find and research what our ancestors, in my case my great uncle, did. And so I'm so proud to be standing here today that the people of Colville still remember what those lads did all those years ago.
This is Frederick Williamson, who we adopted at the local job centre. We took our inspiration from his very own words in letters he wrote to his father, expressing his sadness about the death of his brother next door. And his words were so gentle and inspiring that a member of staff wrote a poem. We looked at what places he'd worked, and we decided that using words as a starting point, that we, as an office, we would use our very own envelopes to create the sepia tone that we've replicated across him. And it turns out that he belongs in our own family trees. 4 members of staff actually connect to this man, so it was quite spooky, really, that he came our way and yet he's now become one of the family.
Up to mighty London came an Irish lad one day. All the streets were paved with gold, so everyone was gay, singing songs of Piccadilly, Strand and Leicester Square, till Paddy got excited and he shouted to them there. It's a long way to Tipperary, it's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know. Goodbye, Piccadilly, farewell, Leicester Square. It's a long, long way to Tipperary, but my house lies there.
They filled our hearts, they filled our minds. They'd be safe behind the lines. There'd be no way that we could fail. Hoist the flag and set the sail. So my brothers fell like rain. Every raindrop bears a name. The storm will rise, the sky will fall.
Tonight has been unbelievable, as you'll see from the footage, and we're all now here with our yellow jackets clearing up, and it's just been an incredible evening. Over 150 people have seen something quite spectacular, and a lot of people are saying it's the best thing that's ever happened in Coalville, which is pretty awesome comments. So thank you to everybody involved, especially to Michael, who wrote the book in the first place.
I served 15 years in the army. I am from the first Gulf, Bosnia, Iraq, Northern Ireland. When I came out, I wasn't in the greatest of place. SAPA put me in touch with once we were soldiers who picked me up, and over a couple of months I went from a bed and breakfast to private rent, and then I've got my own bungalow. Last June I came off the books from a client, and I'm now the caseworker for a charity. People don't realise we're only a small charity. There's about 20 volunteers, but Andy and myself are actually the only two full-time caseworkers. And I can't say much. You know what I've done the past 2 years has totally transformed my life. Back in a good place. What I'm doing now for the charities, it just does me the world of good. It gives me basically a brand new lease of life. It gives me a goal.
Well, I'm part of a charity called Once We Were Soldiers. I got involved with Coalville Heroes through some other things that they were doing, so came along and joined in, contributed some ideas, ended up making the knapsacks for the frames on the back of the soldiers. I've done some big poppies. I did the idea for the trench, although I didn't actually build it. I came up with the idea. Just helped out in whatever way that I can help out, really. Once We Were Soldiers, we support veterans who've fallen on hard times. More than 10% of the UK homeless are actually ex-services. So there's a lot of people out there who need our support. We try to get them off the streets, temporary housing to start off with, and then into more permanent housing. We get them the support that they need. A lot of veterans suffer with mental health problems, so we actually point them towards an organisation called Combat Stress, who can actually help them and basically provide food, accommodation, whatever support that those veterans need.
Reading the stories, you realise that whilst the work and the stories are very embedded in the local communities and villages and streets of the town, people have come from all over the world. Some of the soldiers here came from East Grinstead, from Stoke, from Stamford, from Leicester, and you realise that it's not just about putting a small little community on the map, it makes that little community much more widely connected to the wider world, and that's exactly what quality arts and quality culture will do.
With it being exactly 100 years since the end of the First World War, it really is something that's on people's minds, and so I think there's a huge amount of opportunity for this exhibition. Obviously we're thrilled to have it here in the store in Colville, but also for it to be something of interest to people nationally. These kinds of stories, this famous 50 story is such a good story, but there are similar stories from across the country.
And I think the work here at the Co-op is a great way, a great example of seeing how those relations can build and basically bring art to the people. This brings high quality art, a high quality engagement process right into the heart of the community.
If you go around, each of the figures have been designed and drawn and researched by different groups in the community, and what's really impressive is the spread of different groups, ranging from a group for children with special needs to adults and in commercial organisations to schools. So it's been, it's a really fantastic spread, and you think of the 50 figures, and there's 50 different organisations, so that if you think about the network stretching out into the community as a result of that, it's will have had quite an impact.
One gentleman has said to us this morning how wonderful it is that he's coming in every day and he just reads 2 soldiers a day, and then he goes back home, and then the next day comes back and reads 2 more soldiers. So it's just fabulous. It also shows we are a community retailer, and it's about what we want to do is connect with the community and the projects that they're involved with. So I think it's a fantastic project to actually showcase.
This is a great way of demonstrating how art can talk to people, how it can be made of people's experiences, and how it can show history in an challenging, inspiring and exciting light.
I wanted my grandfather and his 49 brotherly friends to be remembered for all time because of what they achieved.